want to go for it, yes, I'm just leaving some room for my title here.
Okay.
But also, quite honestly, that's additional detail.
Okay.
What that does is explain how this happened. The major event here is that he and his friends were selected, am I correct?
Yes.
Do you see
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Okay, now how they were selected is, and why they were selected is all the details that's going through your mind right now, that he would not defile himself and that God showed favor for, on him in the eyes and the heart of both the king and the official, so that it would work that way.
Okay.
And but you get to that, that's all the things that support this. The ultimate big picture here, though, is that Daniel and his friends were selected.
Got it.
And we're going to get into, inductively into the meat of it later when we get into the chapter.
Thank you
okay?
for explaining that.
Yeah, yeah.
Could it be like Daniel needs the king or the king needs Daniel? Would that maybe be the main theme of this
Daniel
chapter?
and friends selected.
Yeah, he gets selected. So in the end, Daniel is selected, right? Daniel and his friends. So, and when they were selected to do what?
Trained to serve the king.
To serve the king. So you can say, you can put selected to serve the king, right? Or put into the king's service, something along those lines. Make it very concise to yourself. Donna?
And what about appointment of king's servants and Daniel's
That
favor?
would work, that would work.
Should I put and Daniel's favor?
You could go on and on, right. I would say that, just know this also, that this first blush that we're going through tonight, this is your first blush in making these titles and making this attempt to come up with this. As the weeks and months go by, you're going to refine it and hone it down so that it's really concise for you. But right now, you do whatever you like. I can tell you that precept is not that rigid. What they want to do is make sure you understand the point to titling. The point is for you to have instant recall. Yes?
I'm a little confused. I thought, I mean, when I think of Daniel 1, the thing that I always think of is the fast. That whole,
Yeah.
so how?
I can see how you would do that.
Okay.
But is chapter 1 teaching us about fasting? Is
Telling how they ended up getting over.
how they ended up in the king's service. Otherwise, you know what's interesting is, consider this. When you move on to chapter 2 and you start reading the events in chapter 2 and you didn't know how Daniel got there, wouldn't you be a bit confused about these Hebrew boys that are serving the Babylonian king, and you'd be going, what's going on here? But because it's a historical document, he's laying out in chapter 1 how they got there, as far as their captivity, that they were besieged by the Babylonians and taken into to the king's service, basically, and that they were put into the king's service, and everything else is the details of that process.
See, I thought
Yes.
the whole thing would be that Daniel's remaining faithful in captivity.
That is why, okay, you answered the question for me. Why do you think they ended up in the king's service? Had they not remained faithful to God,
But God knew that they were.
Without defect.
pardon?
Because they were good looking without defect.
Uh-huh.
Because God knew their hearts and their character, and they knew the people to put there.
All of the
And the wisdom,
contestants were though.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. All the contestants
That's right,
were.
they're all picked first.
But
right?
they-
In the process of this story, what you see is that God allows favor to be given to them, right? Did you notice that?
Right.
Ron
That's
said
what
good
I said.
job.
In my title, I said God equipped Daniel and his friends for service. to the
That's
king."
right.
Because he kept telling about how God gave him this and God gave him that. And
Yes.
it wasn't on their own accord, so I thought it was
Okay.
important to keep
Ron,
the God.
Ron says,
Yes.
Daniel, eat his vegetables.
I love it.
That works.
Hey, you know what? If
Hey, I
it
remember
helps
that.
vegetables, if that helps you recall the fact that he was faithful to God and therefore God put him in the service of the king, that you know that nobody's going to argue with you, Ron.
The
It'll work.
the
I have a
vegetable-
British friend that had it. She had some. My British friend, when we did this years and years. Okay, years and years ago, I lived in Turkey, as you all know, and I had one of our students, and there was a British gal, and she had some of the funniest titles. She had, you know, the 4 men in the fire was burn, baby, burn. You know, she had some really cute ones. So yeah, he ate his vegetables. If it reminds you, so that you know what the heart of the message is, it's fine, as long as it's true to the message. Is the message about the fact that that he ate his vegetables, I'm not so sure.
Right,
But trust me, Ron, that it's
He's
cute enough
faithful.
that it'll remind you. If it reminds you, then that's what's most important right now. And as we progress through this, you will refine your titles, okay? But for right now, what we see is the big picture of chapter 1 is the end conclusion of it. What happened? They ended up in the service of the king. Daniel and his friends ended up in the service of the king. And that was the message of the whole story. They started it, and there was all kinds of details in between that led you there. But the end result is that they ended up in the king's service. Because this is a historical document. Okay, so you have to start on that level. What kind of literary, this is why Kay said, what is the literary work that you're in? It's historical. Now, if we were doing a different kind of literary work, you might have come to some of these other kinds of conclusions. But because we're looking at a historical document, we are looking at who are the major characters, what are the main events, and what is the time frame. Does that help?
Yes.
Good. Okay, good.
Okay, moving on about our.
Okay, so we're going to put on here, I like the fact that what Laurie said about God put them, and I actually on my titles had put that too, but it's not necessary. But just put in the king's service is good enough. And you can put on there, Daniel and his friends are put in the king's service if you prefer. Or Daniel and friends selected to serve the king, that would
And
work.
you'll put King Nebuchadnezzar or to remind
Yeah,
the king.
see, you could if you wanted to, but I can tell you that by the time you're done with this, you're gonna remember what king it is in chapter 1. Yeah, okay? So now, we have the feel of what we're looking for now on this very superficial overview. And that is a key. It has to be the big picture, not details. Okay, so let's go to chapter 2 and do it again. Let's look again at the who. Who's in chapter 2? Again, we've got Nebi.
Nebster.
2 change chapters, I know. And who else? Okay, Daniel. Well, you laugh when you say that. Oh, it's Daniel, obviously, but do we ever get to a point where Daniel's not in one of the chapters?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
we
like,
do.
what happened to Daniel?
I know.
It's like,
whoa.
where'd he go?
Where'd he go? We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so the who is Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel. Now the when.
Second
year
year
of the reign of
of reign of King Neb.
Interesting. Second
Yeah.
year. Two, one. Okay. Any other insights on the when? We see that in the unfolding of some of these events. Let's talk about some of the events, and we can come back and add more of the when if we need to. But let's talk about the what then. What do we see going on here?
Daniel interpreting the king's dream.
Okay, so the first thing that happens then is Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, right? He has a dream. What is the dream of?
Of the statue.
The rise and fall of future kingdoms.
Future.
Okay, so we've got in verses 3 and 5. Hold on, I'm going to move this so I can get my.
Oh, the statue's on there.
We see the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to understand the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. There's an interesting little point too, by the way, the language there that's given to us. O king, live forever. Tell the dream to your servants, and we will declare the interpretation. Hoo hoo! That's a little bit bold, huh? Turns out they're not so good at that, though, huh? The king then replied to the Chaldeans, the command from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn from limb to limb, and your houses will be made a rubble heap. A rubble heap.
Kind of dramatic, isn't he?
Okay, so we have Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of a statue, and he demands
Keep a rubble.
It clearly shakes him enough that it's.
interpretation. In that demanding of interpretation, there's also a threat, right?
Yeah, and I would assume that this must have shook him enough, well, I guess that's, never mind. That'll be later, right? Interpretation.
Okay. All right, so Nebuchadnezzar says a dream of a statue, he demands interpretation of it, and there's a threat of death to them if they're not able to do so. Anything else that is major events as you see this unfold? What happens next? Are they able to do so?
No.
They can't, because Daniel, when they go to round Daniel up for the death, he politely asks again for some time. It's interesting how he politely says, well, could I speak to the king? And then politely asks, could I have some time to answer you?
Right.
The dream is revealed to Daniel by God.
Okay, so then the dream is revealed to Daniel.
After what though?
After prayer.
After prayer.
I mean, that's after he, he politely asks, then he goes to his
Friends
friends and
ask him to
says,
pray.
let's ask for God's mercy here.
Yep.
Okay, so the dream is revealed to Daniel after prayer. What verse is that in?
Well, first they prayed, didn't they?
Um,
Okay,
17.
verse 17 and 18, right? Okay, so in 17 and 18, we see that he goes to God in prayer, and God gives him understanding. And,
And he tells the king and saves everybody's life.
so then in the end, Daniel gives interpretation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he tells the dream and the interpretation. So,
Well, yeah, now that's exactly, tells the dream and gives interpretation. And then what happens?
And King loves him.
he's
Huh?
rewarded.
King loves him.
Daniel is promoted. Daniel and his friends are promoted.
So, was the king asking two things? One was, what did I dream? Two is, what did it mean?
Yeah, that was pretty.
Because they kept saying, how can we tell you what your dream is? We didn't have your dream.
Yeah, very interesting. I can't wait till we actually get into
Yes.
that. Yes, so here what it says is Daniel tells the dream and he gives interpretation to the king. That he blessed God. God said, let the name of God be blessed forever, for wisdom and power belong to him. He gives God all the credit in it. And then he goes on to tell him, let's see, wait a second, let me find the verse. The
So this
mystery.
was the dream now.
What I loved about this
That's
was
important.
all the praise that Daniel gives to God. That
First.
he keeps,
First.
he keeps
too.
going back and making sure that this king understands it's not Daniel. Please don't put Daniel up on a pedestal. It's not about Daniel. Daniel is simply the vessel through which the God of heaven is speaking.
And he even kind of plays to the king that way, saying, oh, God didn't give me this dream, he gave it to you. To you, king, he's told the future. And I'm just here to tell God's interpretation now.
Right. So in chapter 2, verse 30, he says, "O king, this is the interpretation," and he gives him understanding. Now, what happens then? They're promoted. Daniel and his friends are promoted. So now, this is a good question when you're talking about the win of it. Now, this is the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. And if Daniel is promoted, what does that tell you? We know that chapter 1 concluded when they had been selected for service, correct? And now we see a promotion. So would you say this is a sequential order, that chapter 1 happens first, then chapter 2?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. Now, were there any questions about the timing on things? Did anybody have any little?
Well, it said they had to have 3 years of preparation.